Hello, hello, hello. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Gaz Williams Show. And I tell you what, tonight is going to be incredibly special. I've got the wonderful Mr. Geert Bevin. Now, I said Geert. We're going to talk. The very first thing we're going to do when we bring him in is figure out exactly how we say his name. And but who is he? He is an incredibly interesting person and someone very, very important in the development of Mpe. I first became aware of him when the Eigenharp came out, and he was an early adopter of the Eigenharp. And then his career has followed very, very interesting developments as Mpe has become this reality. And I think he's an incredibly important person in that journey. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, amongst other things. So Before we get into the show, I just want to say one thing is that I'm going to be making a little roundup of the last year of shows that I've been doing. So if in any of the shows you think that there have been moments that should be included in a little best of, if you will, like a best of the last year, it could be little musical clips or it could be little bits from interviews. It would be fantastic if you could let me know. And a good way to do that is if you were to go to the actual video and comment with a time. Please, if anyone could do that, if they think, oh, do you know what? That was a really good bit in one of your shows, and you knew which show it was. Just comment in the comments for that particular show with a timestamp. Oh gosh, that's a big ask, but yeah, if anyone fancies doing that for me, I'd be really forever grateful. I have no idea. I never watched really back the shows properly. I watch them back, but usually with the audio back turned off, just so I can watch the chat room. Anyway, enough about that, and we should get on with the show. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to bring into the room and into our show Mr. Geert Bevin, and here he is. Hello, sir.
Hi, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, huge pleasure. It's a huge pleasure. You heard my introduction there, so it's we've got a lot to cover tonight. So, firstly, then, how do we say your name? How I always say Geert, and that's not right, is it? What is it?
It's not right. Geert.
Geert.
Yes, that's almost perfect.
Okay, so you kind of lead with a he. It's almost like here.
It's almost like you scrape the back of your throat.
Yeah.
And then you open up your mouth really big. And then it's as if you're going to spit, but with like a rolling R before it.
Okay.
It's a mouth exercise name. Like if you ever want to develop your mouth muscles.
Yeah. Geert. So we go Geert.
Yes.
Geert. Okay, I'm going to work at it. And then hopefully through the show, I'll be able to do it properly. So I apologize for the countless times I've mispronounced you over the years. And, and funnily enough, you've been working for Moog, who we've been mispronouncing.
You mean
Moog? We've been mispronouncing it for so long. My goodness. Oh, yes. However, so I'm just checking in with the chat room to make sure we have a show and that everyone can hear everything and we are rocking and a rolling. Are we not? Yeah. Oh, I think we're good. So I'm just waiting to see some chatties say hello. Here they go. Hello. Fantastic. Hi. I can see some action. We have a show and a humdinger of a show because, we're going to go all sorts of places, aren't we? And I mean, especially the last 10 years, I think, really, this is going to almost be like a kind of a little digest of music technology developments of the last 10 years. And so I mentioned then about the Eigenharp. Now, the Eigenharp was released in, 2011 or 20? There they are. And we were
I think it was a bit earlier.
Okay, I remember I'd started being a panelist on Sonic Talk, and when they were released, so it was
the Alpha was in 2009, the Pico in 2010, and the Tau in 2012.
Okay, there we go. That's great. So what we can see behind you then is it the Tau and
this is the Alpha.
The Alpha,
the big one is the Alpha.
Yep.
The Tau next to it, and then little Pico.
Aha. So that's what I had. I had a Pico.
Pico's fun.
So, right. So now, but the thing about this, and why I wanted to mention it, was because this was the first time I became aware of your good self, you see, because you were somebody who had really seen that this could be something that is like you're very interested in expressivity and I mean, you're a fine acoustic musician and singer and acoustic guitar player, so you've got that instrumental ability, but also very, very interested in the technological side of it. So did you see then the Eigenharp as this marriage of the two?
So what happened was, like, I've been a singer-songwriter since I've been like playing music, and I dabbled in a few bands along the years until I had this band that was going more towards the like electric side, and I wanted to introduce some synths in there. So I was like, okay, well let's get a MIDI guitar, and because I had been playing around with soft synths, I was like, okay, let's get a MIDI guitar, hook them up, and then I realized like how primitive MIDI guitar technology was. I had a really hard time even doing the basic amount of expression there and feeling like I was in control. I could like sort of blast things out and have like a little, like maybe a little sweep, or I could maybe control the volume swell, or like very, very carefully a pitch slide if I didn't introduce too many artifacts. And it felt wrong to me. And like what always bothered me at that point, like I tried a whole bunch of different like MIDI guitar solutions, ending with the Axon that has been considered as the best one, because what they did was they sampled the frequency of the pick touching the guitar before the sound was playing, so they could get like a microsecond or two additional latency out of there, like less latency.
Right.
But even with that, it was still like, I felt like I had to be even more precise as with acoustic finger picking. And if I wanted to do anything that would not be like perfectly in tune, you'd have to be so careful to mute other strings, and you like, it was hard. And then I was like, this actually feels weird, because you have this polyphonic, super expressive acoustic, even though it's electric, but it's still acoustic instrument. The sound is being like converted, and they try to match that up with a digital signal. And right at that time, Eigen Labs announced the Alpha, which totally makes sense to me, because their idea was, let's just use very high sample rates and individual control streams, 3 control streams for each key. And from the get-go, each position that you put your finger on was already digital information. Instead of going from the sound, it was going from the sensors.
Yes. So let's just so we're talking about 2009 then.
Yes.
Now, so this is significantly many, many years before the likes of the Rolly Seaboard, for instance.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
When did the Harkin Continuum first appear?
I think it was a bit even a bit earlier.
Right.
Let me look it up.
A different. That's a very different.
Yeah, 2002.
2002. All right. Okay, and that's been in a constant sort of development. The new one looks absolutely brilliant, but
That's amazing.
it's a very boutique priced instrument. Beautiful though.
I always have like, that's just my thought, and I'm a senior software engineer, so I make a good living. But still, if you consider any really good acoustic instrument, you're going to pay quite a few thousand euros, dollars, pounds for a really good acoustic instrument. If it's like violin, cello, talking about 1,000 is like, why would no? You're like entry level, right?
Yeah.
So
very good point.
So like a really expressive, good electronic instrument, I'm not surprised that you will be in that price range. Right. It's not intended to be like an instant gratification tool. It's intended to be a lifetime of practice.
Yes.
And it's a little bit like you can buy an expensive Ferrari. Don't expect to drive it like a Toyota Corolla because you will end up in the ditch immediately. Also, don't expect to have no maintenance on an expensive Ferrari because everything is finely tuned and needs to be maintained just to get all those like little pieces of performance out of the engines and how it's constructed. And that's sort of how I see these very expressive electronic instruments. Yes. They try to bring out all these nuances, but that has a cost, both in money, but also in dexterity, learning how to play it, practice, figuring out how to hook it up, like all of those things.
Right. So now, we're talking there, we went slightly off track from the Eigenharp mentioning about the Harkin. No, it's all great. It's all great. I'm just pulling us back to the Eigenharp though, and because the Eigenharp Alpha, I mean, that certainly wasn't cheap. What was that? That was around 3,000, was it maybe?
No, it's more. That was in the 5,000 range, I think.
Wow. So we can see it. We can see it behind you there, and it was like,
That's
like almost got like a steampunk aesthetic there with the kind of brass and the wood, but there was all different finishes you could get out of the different woods as well, wasn't there? And look how beautiful. I mean, it's like a finely made instrument, isn't it?
I mean, this is over 10 years old and it's still perfect condition.
Right.
The keys on mine are actually wooden keys also. They're not plastic.
Okay.
You could get it with the plastic keys, but I wanted the wooden ones so that it would the plastic ones are cheaper, but they start like becoming cumbersome when you're sweating.
Right.
So what you have on the Eigenharp keys here, you've got these little like curves where your fingertips fit in the key, allowing you to balance the rocket back and forth, up and down, and press it. So it's like a little joystick. Each key is a little joystick with a little spring going up and down, left and right, and in and out. But it's not like individual springs. They develop this sort of metal alloy mesh for each key.
Wow.
I think they had a special alloy made, if I remember correctly, just to ensure that it would last for decades of use. They really didn't want you to feel like your key all of a sudden would stop like after a year of use. The intent was like 50 years of use.
Wow.
Like going towards a lifetime of practice.
Yeah, wow. So, I mean, just want to say thank you so much to Robath, Melted Cheese Home Studio, and also to Jan Stim for the tips. They're coming in now through. How nice is this? Being able to be, it's like we're having a conversation busking. What I was going to say.
I don't know if you can see it, but these are the plastic keys. I don't know if you see a difference.
Let's
on the Pico.
Yeah. There's
I'm sorry for the noise. Like someone doing the yard outside. That was unplanned.
That's nice. We're getting a nice Doppler effect.
Maybe this is gonna be the advent of the expressive lawnmower. Like how to get the most expressiveness out of a lawnmower.
Yeah, I mean, using like kind of the same controls off the Eigenharp for varying the kind of pitch of the blades, just to get like you can say, oh look at that, there's a flower and there's a little tiny weed just about to touch the flower.
But also like the most expressive way to make crop circles.
I like it. Yeah, actually, the sound is giving extra drama to our conversation. So, yeah.
Nice. I think he's moving away.
All right. So we're talking about the Eigenharp. Now, we should probably mention John Lambert, really, shouldn't we? Because he is...
John, genius. Right. The inventor of the Eigenharp.
Right.
Yes.
And so John had been very successful in the networking business or something in the 90s.
He was very successful in the 2000 internet boom,
right.
Where he had a company that did really well, and then he sold it. And his lifelong dream was to create his own musical instrument. He's also like a really good musician, also a folk musician, plays with his wife and friends and writes his own songs and lyrics.
Right, but he had got into making electronic music a little bit. Is that right? At some
yes,
point?
A little bit, yeah.
So similar to yourself then, somebody who's got this kind of connection with acoustic instruments, but also a deep interest in technology and then sorry, carry on.
Yes.
So what happened? How did he get the brainstorm, or what happened?
This is just my
Of course, yeah. So,
version of the story.
Yeah.
Like I'm not pretending that I can speak for John.
of course not. Of course not.
So brilliant person, a little bit eccentric, which makes him even more brilliant in my opinion. So he lives in the middle of nature reserve in
The Quantox.
in England, like Exeter area, but a little bit further on. Like one of the things he told me that there's a direction where you can walk for 2 days and not encounter a single other house, which is pretty remarkable in that area.
In
So
Britain.
he sort of went to live there, built a farm, totally self-sufficient, and built his company where he really wanted to build this instrument from first principles onwards. So he approached it not considering the history of electronic music. He approached it purposefully as like, how can I get the best signal with current technology from an electronic instrument that could replace the Gibson guitar? So one of the things that people probably don't know, like the Eigenharp has this, you've got this trap that you can wear, and you've got a little hook here that hooks in the back. It's perfectly balanced. And the weight is the same weight as a Gibson guitar, which was one of the driving design factors.
To keep it within the weight of a guitar.
Yes.
Wow.
Like an electric guitar, like an electric heavy Gibson guitar, but still, like
Interesting design.
because his idea was he wants electronic music on stage, which is also why they developed this. Hang on. So you've got this cable that plugs at the bottom here. They experimented with a whole series of wireless technologies, but they were all either not reliable enough, or too slow, or too much jitter or latency. So they used this serial protocol over a wire that transfers all of the data in high speed, uncompressed, straight from each key to the base station, and the base station is then connected to the computer over USB. And his idea then also was that those cables, I think the length that he wanted them to be able to go was like 50 meters.
So brilliant for
Yes.
stage use.
So yeah, stage, like walking around, running around on stage and being able to get everywhere you want. You could then, if you wanted even more, you could chain base stations together to get even more range. So like it was really, he tried to come up with something new, not using the established status quo, which is just incredible.
Yeah.
And at every level of design, material, the wood choices, like the sides, like there's strips on each side here, touch strips that you can either use to slide or to touch at specific positions based on how you configure it. Those are made out of leather, so they feel really good.
Really nice. Now the arc of the Alpha has a kind of like it follows the way your fingers kind of fall.
Yes, that's an ergonomic decision to be able to get to the other sides more easily, and also like to play barré if you wanted that. One of the things that is also pretty interesting, that I find interesting, is there's these percussion keys at the bottom, 12 percussion keys, that are bigger, and they are curved in the opposite way. So they're curved outwards instead of inwards, with the intent of you basically like standing on stage, playing here, and then using this hand to play either bass notes or percussive elements together with the other side, which is why they're slanted like that. But they also have 3 dimensions of control for each key.
Yes. So now, this is the thing. What the keen-eyed viewer may have spotted is the lack of any display on there whatsoever. So there's no kind of no little panel there to tell you what's going on. Now this leads me to something which a question really, which that I really want to ask you is, Do you think that if they had made it a little bit more user-friendly, it would have been more successful? Because it requires an enormous amount of learning, doesn't it?
Well, there's two questions in here.
Okay.
I want to reply with one. One reply is this. This is the instrument. It has no LCD.
That's true.
But is also very user friendly.
It is.
Once you start using it, you immediately know what to do, and you're not getting confused.
But
so there's two things here. I learned a lot from this. It's also what I've used in the years after that to get to designing products and joining Moog, and being very passionate about user interface and user experience design. The rules, the limitations you decide upon don't necessarily restrict user friendliness. You can design, you can restrict yourself into a corner if you're not careful, but that's quite hard. It's actually pretty interesting, I find, to decide upon a restricted set of rules that basically are your painting brushes. And you will use those as the elements that you design your user interface with. Now, what happened with the Eigenharp is, like I said, John, extremely brilliant, smart, probably the smartest person I've ever met, having very, very high standards of people's ability to learn and comprehend things. And he had a brilliant, very brilliant, forward-looking idea, being... Hang on, let me rephrase this. An idea that stems from him recording in the studio. And so he was recording in the studio, and it was his first experience where he actually had a dedicated recording engineer and a helping hand that would hook up all the devices that he needed. So he would just be able to sit there, record, and say, I would like to have this chorus plugged in because I think that would sound nice on my electric guitar. And instead of having to stand up and get out of his creative space, finding the chorus pedal, figuring out how to hook it up, he had someone to take care of that. And then he could say, well, give me a little bit more, increase the depth, change the rate, add another effect, switch them out. So he could sort of experiment verbally without having to get out of his creative space. And when he was developing the Eigenharp, he came up with this idea, what if I can talk to the computer? What if I can have a conversation with my electronic system and have a similar experience? Which I think it's a brilliant idea.
You're right.
But at the time, the only real way to do that, because speech recognition systems weren't that evolved. Currently, Siri and Alexa and they're all sort of getting there, but it's still not perfect. So the only way he could get to that was to come up with his own basic alphabet that you would play with musical notes on the Eigenharp, and then a language with nouns and verbs that was derived from that alphabet, with then sentences you could create.
Right.
And that sort of drove the design of the system. It was not visual, it was verbal, even though you typed it on the Eigenharp.
What's it called? It's called
Bel Canto.
Bel Canto. It's called Bel Canto. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Bel Canto, the language of the Eigenharp.
Yes. And if you think about it, you can still say now, because then all the other stuff was added on. You can type, but you can also, on the keyboard, but also on the Eigenharp, if you know how to do it, you can type, hey, what is it again? Scalar, hey. So you talk to the scalar agent, hey, set octave to a value. And you would just be sitting there typing that in, and the octave would change. You wouldn't have to pre-program your UI. You wouldn't have to come up with a specific visual arrangement. As long as you knew the vocabulary, you could have a conversation.
So are you using the microphone on the gooseneck?
No, you're not like you would have the conversation by typing it.
By typing it. So that was
Typing it
so you had to learn
on the Eigenharp.
yeah.
And interestingly,
Yeah.
like the first people that demoed the Eigenharp, there were two guys, and like, they made this very, very beautiful performance of what's it called again? Damn it, DJ Shadow.
Oh, that's right. DJ Shadow Tune. Yes, I remember. That was yeah.
That really famous tune.
Off introducing.
Yes. Building Steam with a Grain of Salt.
Right.
Is that it?
I don't think people know the titles of these tunes because they're not, but will absolutely recognize them when they hear
Yes, Building Steam with a Grain of Salt.
Building Steam with a Grain of Salt.
Yes. Yeah. And so when they played that and they trained for it, they could not use the UI. They had to type in all the commands and know the language by heart, as sort of like a trial for the system.
Yeah, you've got to show it working. People have to be able to learn it and then interpret it with something that is meaningfully music. You know?
They didn't like it.
Right.
So that's sort of the disconnect. That's the disconnect between the genius, who's John, and the user. So his idea is brilliant, and it would be brilliant if you could actually talk. And even then, like UI and control elements are so powerful in being very succinct for certain operations,
right,
while language is quite verbose, and to do something or to express something, you usually have to take a lot of time or use a lot of words to be precise. So that then led into the design of the user interface, which all had to be programmed through Bel Canto, leading to that user interface that was really hard to understand because it was not designed with from the user interface and user experience primitives. It was sort of added after Bel Canto existed.
Okay, so Bel Canto was the fundamental principle.
Yes.
And if people could if they could adopt Bel Canto, then here is essentially the most expressive instrument ever built.
And so what you could do, for instance, like you could play a Bel Canto phrase, so say that something would happen, and then you could potentially store that as an action and have it done over and over again, and then redefine that on the fly as you're performing. You could sort of morph your performance environment on the fly by having that verbal interaction, that language interaction with your electronic instrument.
Right. So an example of this, I always seem to remember like you could build a synthesizer in real time. You could go add an envelope, route an oscillator to that envelope, and then route that through the filter, and then I can control. I've got all my controls. I can change each value. I can set up.
But you have to see, one of the problems there also is him being such a genius mind, like keeping that whole context in your brain,
right,
is really, really hard, and it's not a skill that a lot of people have developed. Like there's certain classes of people that have more practice with that. Software engineers have a lot of practice with that, so that's why it sort of made sense to me. And also, most of the people that worked on it were hardcore software engineers. We are used to keeping like big architectures in our mind while we're working on things, and that's a skill that we've honed. So that's a skill that we can work with. But John sort of had that expectation from most people,
right?
Which is sort of the downfall, I think, of what he came up with.
Right. So, I mean, this kind of is going to lead us on quite nicely to other parts of the conversation that we're going to go over in the show tonight, to do with the development of Mpe. Now, Mpe as in multi-polyphonic expression, or is
multidimensional.
Multidimensional expression, and this is something that is getting there in terms of, I mean, lots of people know about it. A number of people have devices such as the Linstrument or the Rolly Seaboard. And we're going to come into this. I'm jumping ahead a little bit.
We're at 3,000 instruments sold.
Okay, now that's significant. And so we're going to talk about the Linstrument in a moment, though. So we will be getting there. And I mean, I'm so interested to hear about your story there with the great Roger Lynn, obviously one of music technology's greatest innovators. But let's just finish off on the Eigenharp though now, because so Mpe as a concept we hadn't heard that term. No one was bandying that around when the Eigenharp came out. And so in the launch of this Eigenharp, and I remember it vividly well, all of this information was kind of just quite, wow, it's quite overwhelming. It's amazing. But now, with a much better understanding of Mpe, even now it would still be this radical, crazy idea, but at least it would be built onto this kind of understanding.
It would still be a big problem. Like one of the principles, like I said before, John started from first principle. One of his approaches was that he wanted to eradicate MIDI from the planet. He thought MIDI was a very ineffective solution to modern day music, and I think probably only like a few weeks before the Eigenharp was introduced to the public, they bolted on some kind of MIDI solution because they realized that people would want that. And then like it's sort of gradually evolved more and more when I started working with them, and I started like being in charge of more of the system. But it was always a really, really hard conversation because John really didn't want people to use MIDI, and he thought that he thought he was in a position, being like an expensive instrument that's hard to play, that people have never seen, that introduces a whole bunch of new concepts. It doesn't have an easy UI. He thought that, and the idea was so brilliant, and it still is so brilliant, but somehow he thought that he would be able to make that take over and replace MIDI by a new solution.
Do you know, I have to cut in here. I'm suddenly having like a realization. You said he was a folk musician. Now I get this kind of impression of this folk musician going to all these gigs and seeing all this kind of like electronic music. I mean, he's got a very good beard, doesn't he? You know, and kind of just going, I hate this MIDI music. I hate this music. I'm a folk musician. I hate this music. And then, then the genius being slightly evil genius in this case, going, but I could destroy it. I could destroy it. All right. And then just kind of constructing a way to oh, that's amazing. So that was his idea, to obliterate MIDI.
Yes. I mean, he was right in many regards. Like, MIDI is an 80s solution to a technology problem that is limited by the capabilities of the 80s. One of the things, and that's just me reflecting upon it. One of the things that I think he forgot about and didn't really consider, maybe he does now, is that it's the only standard that manufacturers have agreed upon.
Yes.
And that doesn't ever happen.
No. I mean, absolutely. This is it.
So as when you have something that the whole world has agreed upon, and you're like, don't take it away. They've agreed upon something. That's so valuable.
It is very, very valuable. Oh, I love this, because as our little story is going to progress, we're going to lead up to MIDI 2.0 and the kind of so this is so stick with us, everyone. This story is only going to get more exciting as we kind of move on. Now, so if you're joining us a little bit late, this is Mr. Geert. Yes?
Yes.
Bevin. not Geert Bevin, that you kind of great unwashed are calling him. So setting a record straight. But we've been talking about the Eigenharp. So the Eigenharp being this incredibly forward-thinking instrument, beautiful instrument, as you say, now 10 years or 11 years later is still flawless. It plays perfectly. Now,
they got so many things right. Like even, and I can't convey this, but the touch of each individual key feels so gratifying that like you just want to touch it.
Yes.
It's just like it feels so good. Like even that was like perfect.
So just jumping in quickly though, Normal Universe in the chat room is saying what was John's issue with MIDI? Was it the sampling frequency or the resolution? I'm just going to say this first. What my thinking is he probably saw that MIDI was dumbing music down, being a folk musician and seeing this incredible expressivity of music, seeing this kind of dumb version of that's got a fraction of the expressivity of like an acoustic instrument.
I think it was also like his scientific mind saying like, wait a minute, 16 channels and note on off events.
Right.
Like,
yeah,
what's up with that? It's got nothing to do with music. And then like only having the majority expressed in 7-bit, which is like from someone that was so passionate about getting the best performance out of everything and being so knowledgeable. Like other little story, he has 2 daughters and his daughters couldn't use a computer until they were able to build a computer. So he taught his daughters how to build a computer from scratch before they could use a computer.
Right.
So that's where his brain is.
Right.
Like,
right. Interesting.
which is awesome. Like there's so many things that I love about that.
Yes. So one of the things when we were chatting about bringing you onto the show, and I was mentioning how we were talking about the Eigenharp, and if that was something, is it still playable today? And we're talking about how the software still needs development. But then you did actually remind me about something, which was quite an incredible thing, was that the software for, and I guess Bel Canto then, was open source.
Yes, so it was intended to be open source. It wasn't released immediately as open source because they needed some libraries to be, like some of the libraries that they were relying upon couldn't be open source, so it sort of didn't make any sense. But then I helped a lot with making it open source. Currently, so let's just, this system is extremely complicated, all due to that Bel Canto underpinnings, right? There's one guy, though, called Mark Harris, who is an Eigenharp player. He also is a soundplane player. He's like a very smart guy. He lives, I think he lives in Portugal or in Spain. And he sort of carried on the legacy of maintaining the open source version of EigenD, which is the Eigenharp software. But since this system is so convoluted and there's been a lot of design decisions that would not make any sense if you wouldn't have that verbal layer in there, he's still done a good job like trying to keep it active. I've always wanted to continue contributing. Sadly, I've not been able to do that just due to life. And every year I'm like, this is the year that I'm going to start again. Okay. This is the year I'm going to start helping out. But one of the things he did do, which is pretty interesting, is so Mark extracted some of the core pieces of the Eigenharp software without much of the fluff. Just like, okay, what would it mean to take those keys and to be able to just use it as a MIDI or an OSC controller without any of the other stuff. And so he extracted all that and together with some libraries for other controllers like the Soundplane, like the Push, like there's a bunch of them. He created a tool called MEC, multi-expression controller software, I think. Not sure, which is also open source. And the idea is to put that on a little Raspberry Pi that can then be the gateway between the Eigenharp and the computer, and it would sort of become like a standalone solution. And I think last I remember, he got that working, and and a few of the like still active Eigenharp users, I think, are using it that way.
Okay, wow, that's interesting. That's I've always wondered about that. Just like if you could find a way of translating it, what a controller it is.
Now it has some deficiencies though.
Right.
One of the things that I didn't realize when I was playing it so much, it's the instrument that has made me realize the deficiencies. You can't slide from note to note on the Eigenharp, because each key rocks in 2 dimensions. There is no fluid way to control a slide that goes between different notes. We were working at one point at using the pressure of the different keys and sort of interpolating between those to figure out what a slide would be like, but that's really hard to control and not very natural. If you compare that with like a Continuum or an instrument where you can just, I'm pressing here and now I'm sliding to there. So like that's so intuitive.
Yeah.
And while like adding vibrato or a tiny pitch bend is interesting, it's not as interesting in terms of pitch expression as being able to do these slides.
Interesting, because I mean, he one of the things that he was trying to kind of make in many ways was it was meant to try and have every form of musical expression, wasn't it? With the fact
it's a fallacy by definition, right?
Right, but because obviously you've got the mouthpiece there, so you've got all of breath control and all of the joy that breath control can bring.
People have no idea how difficult it was for them to make that mouthpiece. Like corrosion, your spit is so powerful.
Whoa. Okay. Yes. Right.
They had so much problems. And so they went, I think it's one of the biggest parts, like also like the key mechanism, like the metal alloy there. But in terms of hardware, controlling the corrosion of that breath pipe, because the way, like when you use that breath pipe, your spit is going to go through it. You can't do anything about it. So one option is to just having it dripping on your shirt, like some wind instruments. John didn't want that, of course. Like, can't have an electronic instrument like with spit dripping on your shirt.
Yeah, I can understand.
Right?
Yeah,
it's like the most expressive instrument ever made, and you got the spit dripping. So what they did was they had like the spit is going all the way through the whole shaft to the bottom, and there's a little hole at the bottom.
All the way through.
Yes.
Oh, okay. My goodness. So, I mean, but presumably there's no kind of leakage potential on its journey down, no?
Well, they had to do a lot of work to first get rid of the leakage, having multiple seals and O-rings and different ways. Like, another thing they wanted, even though, so this is the mouthpiece, right? Goes all the way through. This is the little output. The spit hole. But you can still see it. Like this is the only part that has been degraded. Is a tiny bit of corrosion here. Right? But one of the things he wanted to do was to be able to take out this mouthpiece, so you can just take it out. So they had to come up with a solution where you can still have a seal, where you can still have a wind sensor that is in here, a pressure sensor. Have the wind go through, have the spit go through, and then properly seal it so that when you blow into it, you have the least amount of pressure loss possible, making it as expressive as possible. Yes, that was a significant project for them. And so one of the things they realized was, I don't know if you can see it, you actually have, so the center part here is where the spit goes through. There's 2 little holes on the side. I don't know if you can see them.
Not quite. Oh, yeah. Can I?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is actually where the pressure is measured.
Oh, right. Wow. Oh, before you put it back, just hold it there a moment. Just turn it so we're looking at the back of it. There's that little indented bit. And what's going on there?
This?
Yeah.
headphone output. So the way the software was designed was so that it's got audio capabilities sending back to the instrument with a high performance headphone output built in. So you would only have to have that one cable on stage and have in-ears connected to your Eigenharp.
And is it right that you could kind of run a mix as well of like other like stage through it back into it? Yeah.
Yes.
And you can control, and then you can. There was like you could like with some kind of key command, you could get to your own headphone mix and then choose how loud so you've got full control of your kind
full
of
control over all the pieces
audio.
in your monitor mix.
Right.
Yes.
Come on. I mean, look at that. You know, it's ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, this is so far ahead of the game.
Little tiny indents every 4 keys so that your thumb
physical.
Yes, can feel where it is while you're playing without having to look at it.
Holy, I mean, fair play. I mean, you know, because there was a lot of...
then retractable stand.
Look at that. It goes long.
If you want to play sitting down, you can play it as a cello. It's badass. And then here, microphone input. Then you could clip on the mouthpiece, and sing through the microphone input.
So, I mean, you know...
Brilliant. Just brilliant.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Like, hardware-wise, this thing is just incredible.
Wow. I mean, and still is, isn't it? You know, nothing has come close to it even still, really.
No.
Not really.
No.
Yeah, fair play.
Even the Continuum, like it's a beautiful instrument, but it doesn't have that feel of like it's just made out of wood and it's like metal and golden trim and.
Interesting. So I mean, but maybe just a little overstretched. The idea was just a little bit too
far.
Maybe not a little bit, maybe a lot too far for certainly for kind of mainstream. And I mean, you know, I remember like because we were discussing it at the time. You know, the investment into that must have been ludicrous. I mean, it must
incredible.
And
he really thought it was gonna take off. Like he had this whole factory set up in Exeter, like this huge building that he was renting, and he hired all these people and had so many employees.
And you need craft. You need real craftsmen to make those things. You can't just. That's not a mass. You know, you need skills to make those things.
Yeah, and he kept believing in it for a long time, but then basically blew through his money.
I mean, the thing is, which I feel a bit sad about, is I remember a lot of the kind of derisory comments, you know, the negative comments that were coming out during the launch time have pretty much come true. You know, I mean, what people were saying is pretty much what has happened. Yet, and in fact, this was kind of a big motivation about getting you on the show to talk about this. So, you know, you have to hand it to him and the design and the forward thinking, you know, it's maybe was not just like 10 years before its time. It's probably still like 30 years before its time. You know?
Such a visionary.
Right. So okay. So I think we'll move on from the Eigenharp, but really this is we'll move to the next. There's so much we want to cover. So please stick with us, everyone, because this story, I mean, is an incredible story, and I'm so pleased that Geert has come. Hey, look, I'm going to get less self-conscious as we go on with this now. Has come along to help sort of tell this story. Now, I would like to move next to Leap Motion, because the Leap Motion was a really, again, is something that kind of, there it is, is something that when it came out, there was quite a big of song and dance about it. It's quite a sophisticated, the pickup on it was sophisticated. You can put 2 hands into it and it will recognize to a fairly complex degree, I guess, what is it? What are we describing this as? 3-dimensional detection using... how was it doing it? What was the technology?
So Leap Motion, the device is cheap, $80.
Right.
It's got 2 infrared cameras in there, spaced apart to create a stereo field. Very high frame rate, not particularly high resolution, just to get that frame rate. The innovation of Leap Motion was the algorithm that David, I always forget his last name. Anyway.
Yeah, find it, because I'm curious to know who the
David Holtz.
David Holt. Okay, so he's
Yes.
the Leap Motion sort of project.
Michael Buchwald and David Holt started Leap Motion, and David Holt like came up with this algorithm. And I'm still talking to David. Like we're still regularly in touch regularly.
Okay, cool.
This algorithm where the computing power necessary on a general purpose computer was much lower than before, and you could infer a skeletal model of the hand with fingers and joints of the fingers from that stereo image at, what was it, like 200 frames per second or something like that. I don't remember the exact. I've got it written down somewhere, but it's like.
I mean, that's
very fast.
Very, very fast. Yeah.
Yes, very fast and precise to less than a millimeter. I think was like very very precise.
Okay.
So that was sort of like, okay, now you've got gesture control in the air for basically $80. That's very predictable and very precise. Yeah.
So Simon, this is a question I've been dying to ask now. You obviously saw that there is musical expressivity potential with this and set about creating a piece of software called Gecko.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that, please?
I saw the Leap Motion arrive and I was like, wow, like this is like those numbers. And it's basically, once you start talking about digital technology, for it to become natural, it's basically a numbers game, right?
Right.
If your resolution, any type of resolution, like it could be sample rate, it could be frame rate, it could be sensor data, if your resolution and your latency is low enough so that it becomes imperceptible to the human senses, because our senses are kind of weak. If it becomes imperceptible to the human senses that there's like little digital steps there, then it starts to feel natural. And it's all about creating that feedback loop where you have an interaction, you experience a result of your interaction, which triggers your creativity and has you respond to what you experience. If that loop is fast enough, you feel creative and inspired. If it's too slow, you feel disconnected and you never have that thing that sort of catapults yourself into that zone of being creative.
Okay, so there, that's where I want to get my massive kind of highlighter marker and just go over what you just said there. I think that's a really, really crucial thing to sort of mention, because the disconnect, as soon as you feel that disconnect, I mean, yeah, it's sort of, it's akin to kind of a lack of sensitivity. It's almost like wearing 15 condoms or something like that,
I've never tried it, but maybe.
But yeah, but sort of, where's the fun in that sort of thing? Right.
So yeah, when I saw the numbers of the Leap Motion controller, I figured that it must be a very expressive musical instrument, provided the right constraints. So when I created Gecko, I spent most of my time figuring out what to disable and what to keep, so that it would be as predictable as possible. You'd be able to be as imprecise as possible while still feeling in control.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yes.
And
so I started from the whole thing, like the initial version had all the fingers and you could do all the things, but that felt too much. So I ended up only using the palms of your hands. You only have two hands, but then you've got like horizontal positions, up and down, inclinations, open or closed, and then how all of these interact together.
I'm just going to jump in though, because what we're talking about essentially is a CC controller, isn't it? So what these gestures that you're
CC,
doing,
but also OSC, like it did multiple protocols.
yes.
Yeah.
So over OSC, then that's going to allow for that much finer control. OSC still feels like it's not mainstream yet. It's
not.
feels
Like OSC has the problem of being a general purpose specification without having a specific use case attached to the specification.
Okay.
So OSC is a little bit like Ethernet. Like you can do anything with it, but then for people to interoperate, everyone has to configure it.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, it can do a lot, but I can't just plug something into something else and have it work. I'd still have to do work myself.
Get in, roll the sleeves up, and yeah. Okay, interesting.
And then like there's been a number of attempts to do that in the music landscape. But then we're going back to the beginning of the discussion. Getting the world to agree upon a standard never happens.
Never happens. Exactly.
Nope.
Yes.
Except for MIDI.
Right. It is the miracle of MIDI, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. So so I was jumping in there though, just to say.
Sorry, I wanted like this little tangent. It's like there's this joke that is going around in the programmer circles. Like you have 9 different protocols for all kinds of things, and then there's this one guy that said, you know what? I'm going to take all the best parts and I'm going to make the ultimate protocol that does this thing. And before you know it, you've got 10 protocols that do all different things. And then you've got another programming coming on. So, oh, all those 10, they're awesome. I'm just going to take all the best pieces and then I know how to do it. And now you've got 11 protocols.
Yes. Interesting. And yeah. So, talking about MIDI then, so Gecko was a way to essentially take the technology of the leap motion and this incredible way of detecting what your fingers are doing and to create specific control values that you can then send. And,
it's basically like a 3-dimensional space in which you can freely move your hands.
Right.
You could either be very exploratory about it and just like, okay, I'm just doing whatever and just chaos, awesome, but controlled chaos. But you could also go towards learning how to control it, and it would be predictable and you would be able to develop skill with it.
Very cool. And I mean, then this was something that was initially like the Leap Motion when it launched. It had its own like kind of app store and and its own kind of ecosystem so you could buy software, and it was originally like a paid thing, but then after a while you decided to do the good thing and just make it free.
Well, good thing, not for me.
I know.
If you get honest about it.
No. Bad for you, but good for the kind of the march of expressivity.
It's this thing, like I get bored.
Right.
And so when you sell something, I always want to provide like good support because people handed over their money and I want to be there for them. I had moved on to other things when Leap Motion became like stopped doing their app store. So I had to start figuring out a different way to sell it, and then I had to start doing my own distribution and support. And at that point, it actually felt more effort than it was worth. So just to keep it alive, I made it free.
But I mean, I think that was a great thing to do. But I do think, though, that this does tap into something that we'll see as we carry on talking through this kind of narrative, is that you are really trying to push expressivity as a concept, and all of the devices and all of the kind of things that you're involved in make sure that expressivity is paramount. So we talked. Okay, so moving then from Leap Motion. I mean, I
want to take like a little side story about Leap Motion.
Please do.
So first of all, they're still around. They're very active in the virtual reality world.
Makes a lot of sense there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But they've partnered with another company and become Ultra Leap.
Ultra Leap.
And the partnering technology is mid-air haptics.
Whoa.
Yes.
Oh,
So-
I haven't even heard that before. Oh my goodness. Okay.
So the idea being that you can have mid-air gesture control, but you would feel what you're doing.
Oh, that was the thing that was missing.
Yes. So they're very, very on the forefront there. It is working, but the devices for the mid-air haptic control generation, are still quite expensive. They're working on newer versions that are becoming cheaper. And with that in mind, Leap Motion has been redesigning their hardware to work on more platforms and more embedded devices. And they're almost ready to release a new version of their SDK. And very recently, like obviously with COVID times, we started talking with them again, so that by the end of the year, I might revisit the whole Gecko story with the new versions of Leap Motion Controller.
Okay, I mean, God,
Yes.
my goodness. Right, that's a biggie, isn't it? I mean, mid-air haptic. I mean, surely the porn industry would kind of go big on that then. I don't know why I said that. But yes, my goodness, that's going to be something that will revolutionize control. I mean, because I was going to say, I bought Gecko. I was a customer. I bought it, and the thing I found that, and it wasn't just to do with Gecko, it was just to do with Leap Motion, was I found it strangely fatiguing to hold your hand in free space.
You could use it with your elbows on something,
Right.
And then it would not be as fatiguing. That's what a lot of people did. A lot of people also used it standing up with your forearms being straight down and then just holding like your forearm in 90 degree forwards, which is way less fatigue. It becomes really fatiguing when you have these multiple joints pointing out. Because you've got this long lever of weight.
Yeah,
if you reduce the length of your lever,
Yeah.
then it becomes way more manageable.
Right. But for me, Gecko was the best use I'd found of the Leap Motion. So, and it was what was interesting for me was because I'd sort of I'd clocked that you were involved in Eigenharp, and then seeing that you'd done this as well, I'm starting to kind of go, this Bevin fella, he's onto something here. He's definitely onto something. I'm interested in this stuff, and this guy seems to be there already. And this is, well, as it carries on. So,
the other thing I did with Leap Motion is GameWave was another piece of software that allowed you to control the computer and play games with the Leap Motion, which was successful, but not as successful as I'd hoped. However, what that resulted into unexpected use case is I got contacted by a lot of surgeons, because what is so frustrating for them is being in surgery and having to consult 3D imagery, and the only control mechanism they had was to touch a mouse. But in order to touch a mouse, they have to go out of the sterile field, remove everything, consult the imagery, scrub again, suit up again, go back in and do it. So once they started using GameWave, they could just have a monitor with a Leap Motion, like a disinfected sterile Leap Motion in the operating room, and basically navigate 3D imagery while doing the surgery.
Amazing. Wow.
That blew my mind.
That blows my mind. That's wow. Okay, now this is getting interesting. So I mean, you clearly then, in your musical expression, your desire to express yourself musically, and as I say, you've been a singer-songwriter since the year dot. You clearly always looking to try to find ways to help.
Just get excited. I see something. I'm like, oh my God.
Right. That's nice. So in a way, that expression of energy is the excitement.
Yes.
So
I've been coding since I was a kid. Like,
right.
I've been coding ever since coding was accessible to children. Like, it just started. So I think in codes whenever it's like, oh my God, let's write something to do this. And then I have this other hat, which is product designer, and I have a nature of finishing things. I hate wasting work. So as soon as I start, I'm like, well, now I got to make a product out of it.
Yeah.
And then that's the most effort. Like, productizing something that's 95% of the work.
Yeah. Right.
But then, like, okay, well, I gotta productize it, otherwise this is all gonna be a waste. And who knows what might happen? And there's been so many examples through my career where, and this is the prime example, like the surgery room. Like, I never intended this to be a thing.
Yeah.
But it is a thing, and it's very gratifying to see that the effort of productizing things, even though it's like financially not really that lucrative, it's good that I've got a day job, and it's good that I've got great partnerships like with Roger, so that I can sustain basically my general income. Yeah. But all these side projects, like they're a drain, basically. They're not lucrative.
But okay, so I mean, but talking about lucrative then, so we're going to talk about your relationship with Moog, because this is something that is, again, it is amazing, because when I think I reviewed the Model 15 app for Sonic State, and it's like, who's the man behind this? It's Geert Bevin. Oh my goodness, here he is again. And, and one of the things that's also interesting when you look through the kind of MIDI setups of the Model 15, Mpe is kind of supported. This is like, I mean, have I jumped ahead of the instrument here? Or
yes,
I have.
You have. Mm-hmm.
Whoa, perhaps I should backtrack to the instrument first then. Okay, let's do that. Let's backtrack to the instrument. I was trying to be... Yeah, okay, I should probably acknowledge some sort of chronological consistency. Yes, everyone's watching. Yeah, okay, Gaz, we've been trying to tell you that for quite some time. All right then. Okay, so... L'instrument then. So Roger Linn, does he need an introduction to our audience? Does he need an introduction? Well, I tell you what, if you don't know who Roger Linn is, you're probably new to music technology, because the influence of the man is absolutely gigantic, isn't it? From
such a sweet guy also.
A very sweet guy. He's lovely, isn't he? So from the Lindrum, the MPC, and through all of the innovations over the years. Adrenaline, yeah. I mean, the Adrenaline was such ahead of its time as a product, really. So Roger's a guitarist, isn't he?
Yeah, a really good one.
And so he's somebody who was starting, making electronic instruments, but expressive.
He was touring with artists. He wanted to become a musician, and then he, like, similar to many people that are technology oriented, they're like, well, I've got a problem. Like, I'm going to try to fix it and come up with a solution, and then sort of gradually came up with solutions.
Yeah. So, I mean, and he's very music first, isn't he, Roger? I mean, music, he's so enthusiastic about music, right? So the instrument then was his version of a MPE instrument, I guess, was probably
before MPE was a thing. Good point. But basically a musical controller that has multi-dimensional inputs. Yeah. So obviously we'll have to mention Rowley and the Seaboard, because that was so much later.
Okay, good point. Okay, so the instrument then. What year did you get involved with Roger with the instrument then? What's your story there?
Man, I'm so bad with years. This has been my crux during my whole years of study. I personally think that dates are useless.
Okay.
So my brain is structured in a way that if something is useless, I'll forget it. So good thing we've got Google. Without Google, I wouldn't be able to find anything.
That's fine.
I do want to. I'm sorry for the like. If you want to be chronological,
No, I don't care. I mean, I'm not.
there
normally.
there was one instrument in between there, which is called Animoog,
Okay.
released in 2011.
Yes. Groundbreaking iOS software.
Released for the first iPad.
Yep.
Allows per finger expression over wavetable synthesis.
Okay. Right.
So that is sort of
Yeah.
post Eigenharp,
Yes.
pre-instrument. Animoog is sort of in between there for me.
Can I just ask though? I mean, your involvement with Animoog, that's a bit later though in the story. Is that right? Or
It is, but I started using Animoog right when it was released because I was looking for a good sound source for the Eigenharp.
Eigenharp, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something that's got individual voices that have got all this independent control.
Yes.
Yes. Interesting.
So yeah, we can get into the Moog story later, but I do want to make that chronological point
Yes.
that Animoog was in between there.
That's a brilliant point. Yeah, I remember because I think for myself, I was reviewing that for Sonic back in 2011, and it was an amazing release, especially as it was branded by Moog as their latest synthesizer, not like a clone or not like a version, an emulation of something. They put it in their pantheon of instruments. This is our latest instrument. It's the Animoog, and which I thought, wow, okay, that's a big statement. It sounded fantastic. It still does. It's a terrific instrument, and it had a really innovative multi-touch. You could slide on these little ribbon controllers. It was incredibly expressive. I used it immense amounts of times. I used it on a big show that I was involved in 2012. I mean, there was very few things that could, on the iOS platform at that point. There it is.
Yes.
But it was a very, very significant release, software release, obviously for Moog, for iOS, and for Mpe, which you can look in the settings there and see Mpe in the MIDI settings. It wouldn't have been there in 2011, but it was something that came along.
Added.
It was added. You're right. Thank you, though. That was a very good. I'm really glad you mentioned that. Then so. That then puts a connection then between your desire for
it is a critical
expressivity.
part in my own story,
Right.
my own personal story, in that I started a conversation with Moog about Animoog, and then about Eigenharp and using the Eigenharp with the Slim Fatty and over CV control. So I started a conversation. In parallel, I was demoing the Eigenharp all over the world, and I met Roger at one of the events, and we started talking, and he had this first prototype of the instrument where it was basically just sending control signals, and everything was done in Max MSP to massage that information, and he was looking for a way to get to the next stage, and he didn't really know who we could rely upon to take charge of that firmware. And so we started talking, and I started talking with Moog, and in 2014 Moog had Moogfest here in Asheville. So I moved to Asheville. I'm in Asheville right now. Had Moogfest in Asheville, and I happened to speak there about the Eigenharp, and Roger happened to speak there about the instrument, and then we gave a joint talk. And after that, Roger basically decided to trust me and to take a gamble so that I would start writing the firmware for the instrument. What existed at that time was basically just an initial sketch. Just like, okay, it does something. We know that we can make it do something, like turn it into a product, but it was just basically a prototype. So from that point onwards, 2014, I basically took charge of the instrument firmware up until now. So still,
Right.
this is basically the way we split it up. So Roger does all the other stuff, and I do the firmware. And our arrangement is a royalty-based arrangement where, based on the sales of the instrument, I have a little portion of it. But that's not why I started doing it. Like, the reason why I started helping Roger out is, so backtracking all the way back, I'm an advocate of open source. Everywhere I can do open source, I do open source. It's not always easy because you do have to make a living and eat.
Yeah.
But I've always been an amazing, open source is so amazing, and it has powered the world and has made the internet possible.
Right.
And it is,
Yes.
and it is like the best way for people to collaborate in a creative coding way.
Hooray!
It's just like, it's so massively powerful and inspirational.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm really passionate about open source, and
Right.
Roger agreed to make the instrument software open source from the get-go, so which made me interested. And the reason why I wanted to help Roger out is that he had been screwed out by Akai out of all his MPC royalties. So all the work that he did was basically stolen from him by the boss from Akai. And that made me so fucking angry.
I bet.
I was like, this
Yeah.
amazing person that had such an influential contribution to electronic music has been screwed over in that way. And I believed in the instrument. I was like, you know what? I'll help you out.
Cool.
This is like an open source project for me. If you're okay with this firmware becoming open source so that it becomes the world owns it, I'll just help you out for free, and we'll see where it goes. It's gone amazing places, but we didn't know that was going to happen. So that's how we started working together. Roger had basically no finances to hire a senior software engineer to do that work. And I believed in his vision, and also thought that it was completely shitty that he got into that situation.
Fair play. This is a great story. I'm loving this story. I mean, this is something, but again, though, you see, I mean, it does come back to this thing with you kind of making Gecko available as well, that you're giving a lot of yourself and your work in trying to make the world a more expressive place, and that is
as much as I can.
highly admirable. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about the instrument then, because you've got one handy, haven't you, to pull out? I reviewed it for Sonic State, and one of the real kind of lovely benefits of reviewing it was that I had about 3 or 4 really lengthy Skype conversations with Roger about the instrument, and that was pure joy. A real, I was so thrilled. He's so lovely and so cool.
So cool.
And we laughed and we went and we're talking about the instrument, but we talk about the life, universe, and everything.
Everything.
We got everywhere. This, and then we come back to the instrument. So that was really fantastic. And then I bumped, or rather, he kind of, I met him in first time in NAMM, I think, and. He just radiates. He just radiates positivity. He's a really, really, really amazing guy. So the instrument then. I mean, what was really interesting about the instrument was it was taking a very small, compact form factor relative to other MPE or things like maybe the Eigenharp, but giving highly expressive control surface. So you got one there, and have you got the big one or the small one?
This is the small one. I've got the big one over there if you want to see it also, but this is sort of more manageable. This is the 128.
Right, which kind of in a way makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, this
one is the perfect size for a backpack, so you can just stuff it in your backpack and off you go.
Right.
I made this thing is not part of the instrument. I added that to it. It's so that it can be battery controlled.
Oh,
and you can
neat.
walk around with it with wireless playing.
Okay, cool.
Instrument.
I did try Linstrument in kind of Keytar mode, because there is kind of there is straps on there, isn't there? So sort of so you can kind of wear it, and that is quite interesting. I did actually find that was surprisingly rewarding.
It's interesting because you've got these two splits, and like you can rearrange like the split point. You can basically say, okay, this is what I'm going to do with my left hand, and something else with your right hand. So even though ergonomically this is not awesome, the left hand, the right hand is ergonomically very awesome.
Yes.
But what you can still do is like trigger things or hold notes down or have arpeggios going on. It's got a built-in arpeggiator. So like with the splits, you can still, in a Keytar mode, get a lot done.
And obviously laying the notes out in the same way as either a guitar or a bass in the kind of the note rows and that you can set however you want.
Yeah, you can set that however you want. That's the standard setup is like the four. It's like a bass guitar.
Bass guitar, linear bass guitar,
without
like multi-string.
Without the fifth string of the guitar, where you've got that pesky halftone.
That pesky halftone.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So I mean, what I really liked about Linstrument, I'm still gutted. I should have bought it. I miss it. What I thought was really, really cool about it was very relaxing to play. You can lay your fingers on it, and you can get the sensitivity, so your fingers are relaxed and not sounding instruments, and then you can just lean the fingers in and feel this control. I thought it was very relaxing instrument to play, and obviously I mentioned the Rolly and the C-board, which I guess is a competitor, I suppose, in this kind of
Like, it's a guitar competitor for a violin. It's not. It's just another instrument.
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry, I mean, I shouldn't really say that way, but at the same time, they're using a different approach in that the notes are laid out ostensibly like a piano, so your piano shapes can be translated. But maybe with Linstrument, maybe your guitar shapes are a little bit more. There's more relation to guitar.
If you have your little like licks, on the guitar, your scales, you will translate them over immediately. It's super fast. Just like a few minutes.
So one of the cool, funky things about getting you on the show today is like, not only are we going back, we've gone back to 2009, and there's still a lot more of the story that we need to cover, but Linstrument has just got a new update. So we can kind of talk about that, because it's kind of been in constant development. And
we've been updating it continuously. Now, to be honest, there isn't that much more left to do. It's so feature packed. It's got two built-in step sequencers with different visualization modes for like scales, drums. You can arpeggiate. You've got low row expression where you can like. It's like a global pitch bend or mod wheel, but in 3 dimensions. And then like it's got a user firmware mode that we brought out a couple of years ago, where people don't have to learn how to program, but there's like a whole MIDI CC protocol that you can use to customize Linstrument's behavior for whatever you want. So there's that. There's now what we added recently. It's one of the last pieces. Like we also added different presets that save complete setups with like songs if you have them in the step sequencer. It's basically all compact in one little device. And what I love about it, that it's got both DIN MIDI and USB MIDI like connectivity. And you can just hook it up to anything.
Yes.
You just walk around with it and hook it up to anything.
Yeah.
Hook it up to
Standalone.
your phone. Hook it up to another
to be,
synthesizer.
Yeah.
Just
doesn't need to be connected to anything. No computer rather. Does not have to have a computer.
Necessary.
So you can DIN MIDI it in, and and that's great. So because maybe the sequencer side is a little bit underrated in a way, because it does all these.
People don't realize it does that, but it's got a polyphonic step sequencer with expression for each step.
Come on, what step sequencer does that?
No, it's got 3 axes of expression for each note in the step. You can play it like in real time or dial it in after the fact, and then you can have patterns that you switch between. You've got 2-step sequencers that can go at the same time. You can have the step sequencers going while you're playing over it. So you can set up a bunch of arrangements you could control with a foot switch while you're playing over it. It's like the ultimate one-man electronic band.
Oh, okay. That is cool. God, you see,
Cool.
yeah. I mean, this is one of those things, isn't it? Because, I mean, I don't think any of that was in there when I did the review.
No,
and
that's
stuff.
we've been adding that over the
That's
years.
it.
Like one of the last things we added in the latest firmware update is like there's a bunch of internal stuff in. I wasn't aware of this before I started working with hardware manufacturers, but it's really challenging to make things in the real world. Like, as soon as you have a tangible thing, it becomes subject to the rules of physics and chemistry and like all of the things that the world is made out of. Spit, like we said. But here, like making these sensors, the instrument sensors, is actually very, very tricky. And the company making them sometimes has a hard time preserving the exact same behavior of the ink, like the resistive ink that is used for the printing. So one of the things we had to do for newer sensors is tweak how the calibration process works on the factory, so that we can get this exact same behavior and calibration curves that adapt to the new sensor. So that was a lot of work. One of the big things that we added, and that's been such a request for years, is people can draw in. It's basically got a drawing program on there now. So instead of using built-in scales for your LEDs, you can switch to 3 built-in presets where you can, like LED by LED, draw exactly what you want to see on your surface.
Wow. Wow. Is there any way to demonstrate that at all with the one that you got there? Yeah. Because let's have a look at this. Because I mean, this is.
So this is one of the drawings that it ships with. It's like guitar dots, right?
Yeah.
So I can go into global settings. I press and hold this. Now I'm in drawing mode, and you can see the little switch here is blinking, which selects the color that I will be drawing with. So now it's going to be purple, and so as I start touching, this becomes a pattern that is added. And now if I play, I can play over this, and these patterns stay there. So you can basically customize your visuals exactly the way you want. So it's like a drawing program, and then if you hold 2 corners, you can erase if you want to erase things.
So I mean, what like a use of that could be, for instance, you could kind of like draw around where you want the notes of a particular chorus or something to be, or an instrument. You know, you could have like a bass line, or you could have drums, and you could have like a kind of, you could draw it all in. And oh, look at that, yeah.
We've got these little effects that you can play with. Like when you play, you can have little LED effects. So you can build out, like there's a few people that do that for live performance, where you have the LEDs building out a visual experience together with your playing. Yeah. And this can complement what the visuals then would look like.
So I mean, we talked about how the instrument doesn't have a screen, but look, I mean, look, you can have text displayed on there that is quite easy to read. And obviously there is the small the little kind of graphics as well. You know, it's the programmability on it is is very fast. You hold a button, doof, 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 and you learn it super fast. That was one of the things that I really, really liked about it.
The manual is basically, for people who have never seen it, but my USB cable is a bit short here. Right? The manual is printed at the top and at the bottom and to the sides. So basically, as you're using it in the different, so you've got per split settings and global settings, and then you've got the sequencer, but all the operations are basically printed on there. So when you don't remember how to do something, it's just right there. And then there's advanced settings, and the UI principle there is you press and hold to go into advanced settings, and then it prints the letters with the LED, so you still have visual confirmation of what you're doing.
Okay, so I mean, it's quite interesting then, like referring back earlier to the talk about the Eigenharp then, and just sort of, there's quite...
It's the opposite in that regard.
Opposite. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so I mean, obviously, l'instrument, an ongoing thing. So what's this? Is this 1.4? Is that the latest? What's the latest firmware?
2.3,
oh, sorry.
I think.
2.3. All right. Okay. But So that's cool. So if you have bought into Linstrument, you're still being looked after, and but it's virtually done. It's like the amount of things that you could do on it is.
We've added so much,
Yeah.
and honestly, like we're also at a point now where we filled up the UI so much that it's getting really hard to make it intuitive
Right.
if we add more.
Yeah. It does so much. It really does so much. So yeah. Okay.
Like there's this other mode that like people probably don't know about. So like, I showed you about the splits.
Yeah.
So I can set the different. Sorry, because it's hard the opposite way. I can set the should be able to set the different split point. Yes. And now I can select. So this is the right split that's selected. I can select, for instance, where am I here? CC fader mode. And now these turn into faders that you can use to control things.
Yeah.
So you could be playing here, and this could be used to control particular parameters on your
Mixes
synthesizer.
or, parameters
or mixes,
or auxiliary sends, reverb levels, or whatever you want. But yeah, very nice. It's a bloody great thing. Anyway, so let's move to the next bit of the story then. So we've teased a little bit about Moog, and so can we jump from Linstrument to Moog? Am I missing anything there? Is that a good sort of link then?
Let me look around. I think it is because it sort of started. That period is a little bit interweaved in that I was using Animoog so much with the Eigenharp, and my favorite piece that I reached out to them. My favorite piece that I wrote on the Eigenharp uses Animoog, but they didn't really have a software team at Moog. Okay. They had some people that they worked with, and they didn't really have an ongoing team that was in charge of Animoog. So as any software, like software as platforms evolve, there's this term that I've heard and I've started using called software rot. If you just take a piece of software and you keep it around and don't update it, even though it hasn't changed compared to current technology, it has rotted because the functionality just decreases.
Right.
So that was slowly starting to manifest in Animoog, but very imperceptible, but slowly starting to manifest. And I did the same thing as with Roger. It's like I started to talk to them at trade shows, and it's like, hey, you know what? I'm used to all of this open source work. Like, I'll sign whatever you want, but I'm using Animoog, so I want it to work perfectly with the Eigenharp.
Yeah.
Just give me the source code, and I'll fix it. And that took a while, but then after a while, they agreed to do that. And then I started working first part-time, doing some tweaks to Filtertron, doing some tweaks to Animoog. And pretty quickly, it was apparent that it was a really good fit. I just love everyone at Moog. It's a great family. I love the history. I love how it's like I'd say we now because I've been at Moog for 6 years and it's the company I've worked at the longest in my life. And I also gradually moved up and now I'm in charge of the whole software engineering department, and we've hired a bunch of people and I have the leeway to actually do software product management and make decisions and design. And it's just like such a great experience to work with everyone at Moog. Like everyone's passionate about music. Everyone has a story. Like the spirit of Bob is present everywhere, and that spirit of innovation and working with artists and still like trying to figure out how new technology fits into that whole story without creating a huge disconnect. Yeah. Anyway, so yes.
Yeah, fantastic.
Animoog, and then Roger Lynn at Moogfest sort of got me talking to Moog and got me working with Moog as a consultant first. And then over the years, I had more and more responsibilities. Then I met my partner at Moog. She's in charge of the modular legacy department.
Wow.
And then I decided to move to Asheville last year in March, 4 days before airspace was shut down.
Crazy time to arrive. But just backing up a little bit then, your first major project for Moog was the Model 15, which was...
It's a project I was basically involved with from the beginning.
From the beginning.
Yeah.
And, well, quite interesting then that your partner was in charge of the physical...
She actually built them, like...
Right.
Yes.
Ah, right. Talk about insight.
Little tidbit. In the whole of Moog history, she has built the most amount of Moog modules.
Wow. Wow. That's impressive. So the Model 15, again, we reviewed it at Sonic, I think, and we were blown away. And one of the things that was, again, very interesting was it was fully MPE. We're getting on to MPE. That's going to be our... There it is. A beautiful, I think at the time and still is, the most wonderful rendering of a modular synthesizer in the iOS on the iOS platform, or let's the touch platform. It goes way beyond iOS. Now,
we released it for macOS a couple of months ago.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. But I mean, when did that come out then? It's a number of years ago now, isn't it, Model 15?
Model 15, 5 years ago.
5 years ago, okay, wow. There was so much that I admired about it. I really loved the built-in sort of tutorial. You could make your own tutorials in it.
It's something that a lot of people don't know, but it's got a built-in scenario language where you can describe how to do step-by-step tutorials, and it will highlight the next elements that you want to focus on, included like with tutorial text.
So
it's been used by a bunch of like schools to create curriculum for like music technology.
Right. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, it should be used by every school, everywhere, by law. So, I mean, so as a way of teaching patching and teaching synthesis, then it's got that facility built in.
Yes.
Was that your idea by any chance?
I don't remember what's my idea or what's anyone else's my idea.
Fair play.
Ideas are really not that important. In my opinion,
right? Because everybody then throws into that, and then the idea just becomes a collaborative.
It's making the product better than it would be if someone by himself would do it, and there's this whole collective effort makes it what it is.
Nice. So I mentioned about MPE. So if you look, for instance, in the MIDI channels, you scroll through the MIDI channels and you get to MPE. And that was also there in Animoog as well. And I think these were some of the first kind of software synths I'd seen.
Well, yeah.
Right. So this is the story. This is the bit I want to get to now, because, MPE from when did we even first hear those digits?
So Roger and I coined the term MPE.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, come on. Yeah. Fair play.
It was interesting to preserve it because it was. So we wrote this. We talked about the spec at NAMM. When was that? 2016, 2000. I don't remember. Like I said, I'm really bad with dates. So it was a NAMM gathering that Rolly started because they obviously wanted a standard that could be used with Rolly's instruments. So they set up this gathering, which was hugely beneficial because it got people talking, and then someone needed to write a spec. And in the good legacy of open source work, I knew that if everyone would say someone else will write it, no one would write it. So that evening I went to my hotel room and I wrote down the initial draft of the Mpe spec saying, hey, now it's a thing. Like, the spec exists. What are y'all's opinions about this? Because now they have a thing to agree or disagree with instead of just this elusive spec, right? And then to make it more official, we started the Mpe MIDI Association working group where we went through the whole process of getting like the world to agree, which is really hard.
Yes.
Going into all sorts of directions, it almost became extremely complicated, and I didn't want that. So I basically, I rarely say this, but I put my foot down and I was like, we're not gonna do this. Like Mpe has to remain simple. It has to be able to be adopted by any synthesizer maker or controller maker. It has to stay as close to MIDI 1.0 as possible just to get that one piece of functionality in that allows this kind of expressiveness.
Yes.
Nothing more.
Yes.
If we go too far, people will not make the effort. And so we rolled everything back and basically almost got back to the initial spec I wrote. And that became the Mpe spec.
Yes, this is amazing. Because, I mean, essentially what that is that every new note that's played has an independent articulation from the previous note.
Yes.
So so that the new note essentially is like on a new MIDI channel.
Yes. So MIDI channels were designed for different instruments, right? Like you could have 16 instruments being controlled over one MIDI port. Now, the basic idea of Mpe is instead of having 16 instruments, you've got fingers, and each finger is like an instrument. You can split it up in two zones because there's 16 channels, and you might still want to control, like you have a controller with two splits, or you have two sound sources. But each channel is like an instrument by itself and has all the expressiveness of an instrument. That's the only thing. And then there's a little message that says, activate Mpe from this channel to that channel. That's it.
Wow. So that was really getting to the easiest way of solving that. That's amazing. So,
and like, I didn't invent this. Roger did. I think actually Lippold did this the first time with how he implemented MIDI on the on the Continuum, and then it just became a way. Like we had to figure out what the agreement could be so that the most amount of people would adopt it.
Right. Yes. So we were talking earlier about how that agreement, that rare multi-company agreement of MIDI, it has to kind of work within that kind of way.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Very nice. So, okay, so I mean, we'll obviously move up to the introduction of MIDI 2.0. I remember there was a time on Sonic Talk and we were talking about something about Mpe, and then the MIDI Association got in touch and complained, or there was a period, I think, where the term Mpe was not quite accepted. There was something.
The official name is MIDI with polyphonic expression.
Okay.
But it really has been intended, and almost everyone uses multidimensional polyphonic expression.
Yeah.
And that is still like the MIDI Association still does a little bit of like lobbying there.
Okay.
I don't know, like I rarely take credit for things or anything, but like I think that Mpe, and that's just my own opinion on this, like I think that Mpe, once it got accepted, made the MIDI Association hip again.
Yeah.
Like, MIDI was not this old 80s thing anymore. And I think
right.
this gave them this drive of what is going on now, where they revamped the website and they created all these seminars and online video conferences and like figuring out a way to finally get MIDI 2.0 or HD MIDI that became MIDI 2.0, finally agree upon it, because how many years? 10 years? So like, I do think that it sort of unblocked the status quo, like people talking around in circles kind of thing.
Yes, I mean that's how it has appeared. I mean, so that's incredible. So, I mean, the arrival then, or it was ratified? Is that the right way to call it? Was it at NAMM 2019 or 2020, where they finally signed in the
MIDI 2.0?
Yes,
2019, I think. or 2020. Yeah, I,
I think
don't remember.
2020, I think, possibly.
And Mpe was 2018.
Right. So and that was incorporated into the standard MIDI spec.
Yes.
Right. And now with MIDI 2.0, it's just part of that.
Completely new.
Right.
Actually, MIDI 2.0 has an alternative implementation, like specification integrated, that allows you to do similar things as Mpe, but with higher resolution and more controllers, and you don't even have to use channels anymore. It's like it's the way it's supposed to be.
Yes.
But Mpe is sort of the gateway to get people, because it was this chicken and egg situation. Like, why do you want a polyphonic expressive controller if nothing can react to it? Right. And nothing will react to it because no one's playing the controllers.
Right.
So having Mpe as a gateway in there,
yes,
so that people can experience what it can be,
yes,
I think unlocked everything.
Yeah, I think so too. That's amazing. Wow. So I mean, it must be very gratifying then. This over this period of time, then seeing that these ideas that you were through that, like, I guess Eigenharp.
I still remember when I was like playing a lot on the Eigenharp, I kept contacting people. It's like, can you please just do voice per channel MIDI? Like each voice has a MIDI channel. And I just kept talking about voice per channel. Why don't you do this?
I've got my own little success story on this. I got in touch with Eric at Spectrasonics about Omnisphere to make Omnisphere kind of do that. And then he was like, "Oh, do you think people want that?" I was going, yeah. And I used the Eigenharp as an example. And sure enough, Omnisphere then became essentially Mpe compatible. Not well.
Nice. Good job. Yes! I love Omnisphere.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm probably really just trying to boost my own ego here. But I think I definitely had a little sway in that, and that was influenced by the potential, of the Eigenharp, because I had the Pico and I thought, wow, if you could do this, and Omnisphere was my primary software instrument at the time. So that's
about Mpe now being in 2021, one of the things we realized is that even though the spec is so small, it wasn't written in the best way. That's what happens when you've got so many companies involved. So now we're actually Pat Scandalis, one of the authors of GeoShred, which is an iPad app that allows you, like Jordan Root has co-designed this, and like it's an iPad app that allows you to play shredding licks, but also a lot of other expressive things.
Similar to the instrument, isn't it? Really, GeoShred.
Yes. Yeah. Except you don't have pressure, and you also don't have tactile references, and you have to deal with the latency of screen. Which it's not as fast as the instrument sensor. So there's quite a few differences once you get to it. But Pat has started a new effort for the last 3 months. We've sort of reconvened with a new expert group, and we are rewriting the Mpe spec so that it becomes as clear as possible. Like, we've pulled in people from many different companies, getting their point of view on how it was to implement Mpe, and then to clear it up as well as possible and clean it up as well as possible, with then a gateway to MIDI 2.0 and a MIDI 2.0 profile that will allow people to gradually migrate like Mpe from MIDI 1.0 and then the MIDI 2.0 capabilities with the different levels in between. So that's going on right now. Like, we've got a weekly meeting going through all of that.
Wow, exciting. Gosh. I'm wondering, it's probably going to be about 5 years from now where MIDI 2.0 will just be old news, so to speak, that the thing's just...
No, I think it's still, like, maybe in 5 years it's going to have enough implementations for it to be useful. And then...
Maybe 10 years then, perhaps, for it to be the norm. So we've got some way to go. I mean,
the nice thing, sorry to cut you off, but the nice thing about MIDI 2.0 is the negotiation aspect, like MIDI CI and the profiles.
Great.
The fact that sort of unlocked that whole specification, in that you don't have to adopt the whole thing. You can take it in stages, and there's a mechanism to communicate between devices. In like MIDI 1.0 was like blast something out and then hope that something receives it and does the right thing. MIDI 2.0 with MIDI CI has a way to convey what your desire is, and then the other side to say, well, I can do a part of this. This is what I can do. And then sort of negotiate what you settle on and then have that done in the best possible way without the user having to figure out how to set this up.
It's what the user wants.
Yes.
They don't want to have to do that. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So, I mean, that side of things, I think, is really exciting. I mean, and as you say, it's going to take a while for this to kind of become normal. But my goodness, the future is bright, everybody.
It really is.
Yeah. So stick in with us. We're on the music technology train. We are going forward. We are going to take over the universe. Wow. So, I mean, I think we're probably drawing somewhere towards the end of our story, really. I mean, goodness.
Feels like it, yeah.
We've gone through a lot. And I mean, I just really totally thrilled to have you on the show and to be able to tell this story.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah, it's brilliant.
I love your show. I love you. You're an awesome dude.
Hooray! But I mean, I think it's super fascinating how your belief in what you were doing way back, and as I say, I've sort of followed you and stalking you and just keeping an eye on what you're up to. Because I guess, like, for myself, I'm a bass player first and foremost, and I've got my MIDI basses, and I'm really trying to look at sort of getting that expressivity that I feel. Why I've always thought, why should the pianists have all the fun? Why should the people who learn how to do all that stuff have exclusive access to all that? I think, no, I've put all my effort I put all my effort into twiddling my fingers this way, not that way.
Yes.
But then when you play with MIDI instruments, that kind of thing that blocks the expressive, the joy, the actual fundamental joy you have of that instrument, is something that kind of typically means that you abandon those technological ideas and return back to just
yes,
the basic idea, either the acoustic instrument or the magnetic pickup simplicity.
I mean, I still play my guitar. That's the thing I play most. It's not for that reason. Like, the reason why I still play acoustic or electric instruments is if I play an electronic instrument, I stop playing and I start designing. It's like, if I play my own, if I play instruments, if I play Eigenharp, I will have new ideas. And those ideas tend to go to the technical side. They tend to go less to the musical side. So I will be playing, it's like, what if it can do this? What if it could do that? Yeah. And then I can't help but do that. I can't help but work on it because I can. It's just right there. It's on the computer. Just type in the code, right? It's sort of the same of why I love the apps that I've worked on, but I don't use them as much because every time I'm like, oh wow, what if we could add this and what if we could do that? Instead of, let's just make music. So I still play electronic music once in a while, but I usually just pick up my guitar because otherwise I never get out of my brain. It's like...
Right. Okay, that's very interesting. Now, actually, there is one instrument there that we haven't talked about. Now, this is an instrument that you haven't, that I'm aware of, had any part in the design of. But to your right shoulder there, we can see the harpeggi. Yeah.
Harpeggi?
Harpeggi, which isn't, I guess, using its magnetic pickups on there?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's magnetic pickups, and it is 16, I remember, 16 strings or 24 or 12, depending on the model. The interesting thing about it is that it's a tapping instrument. You play flat. Each string is offset by 2 semitones. So you got a huge amount of repetition. Initially, I was really put off by that. That's one of the reasons I wasn't interested with it at first. But then I played one at NAMM. This is actually the one that Stevie Wonder played on.
No way!
I bought it. Yes.
Yeah. Never change. Don't change the strings. Don't change the strings.
And so...
Wow.
I played on it and I was like, this is so intuitive because you've got all these patterns just laid out in front of you. They came up with this neat notation of how you can figure out what the like intervals are and the relationships. And and just like on the instrument, you've got these isomorphic patterns, but you've got them repeated all the way to the top. And wherever you are, you can just figure out another one without having to shift to another position of the instrument.
Interesting. Just a quick shout out to Wagyu and HK for tipping this show. These tips I'll have to in the future take you out for a drink. I did have a little sneaky. I was drinking Belgian beer and in tribute.
Yes,
to,
I noticed it, and I was like, yes.
Yeah, it's my favourite type of beer, Belgian beer. I'm a massive Belgian beer fan. At Christmas time, I had, I think, about 40 different bottles of different ones, and
That's awesome.
I just, oh my goodness, yeah. So, beer fans out there, I genuinely believe that Belgian beer is the best in the world. So
I agree.
yeah, I mean, because what they call like what you got Blue Moon over in America, haven't you? That they call as like a Belgian beer, and it's sort of like a.
There's many more now. Like Asheville is sort of America's beer city now.
Oh right.
There's like hundreds of breweries and different types of beer. Like variations, a lot of them Belgian inspired, but also a lot of them IPA inspired or anything in between. It's pretty interesting. Like,
but is it made by Trappist monks though?
It's not. It's not.
You see, it's
it's
all
not
that kind of monkey, that monkey goodness getting in there.
Yeah.
Monkey goodness.
But at the same time, it's kind of cool to be hanging out with your like brewer. Like he's just like.
Okay.
Usually you've got like the pub, and then the brewer is in the pub brewing the beer next door, and he's like, and you should have this conversation, and he tweaks the beer next time around. It's a little bit different, and it's got a different name, and it's got quite a bit of charm to it.
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. I'm going to give Bristol a bit of a plug here. I've been drinking a weekly sensible amount of Arbor ales, and it's just made really close to where I live. And similar thing, it's just, I don't know, there's something really good.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's a good feeling.
But anyway, I think we'll kind of pull the show to draw it to a close now, because I think we've had a fantastic. It
was amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
And thanks everyone for listening and sticking with us for 2 hours. This is a long time.
It's a big story, to be fair. There was a lot of information that we needed to get across. Is there anything that you'd like to add, though, just before is there anything that you've got coming up or that you'd like to talk about, or anything?
Well, I've got my little thingies,
Oh yeah, let's talk about.
Cubes.
Oh my God, yes, of course. There's a part of the story now. People who watch the show, especially who watch my Monday show, my Adventures in Eurorack, I've been banging on God, how can I forget? This is another part of the story. The cable cube. This is a phenomenal thing. I mean, it's since to be fair, you did send this to me, but they are available to buy. And since I've been using it, I use it literally, all the time now. I mean, it's just a way of keeping your cables like to hand and in a really practical way. And what's really clever about it is that when you plug in the jack sockets, they click in. And you get like a little bit of a sensation, not much, but just a little sensation of it clicking in. So they kind of, it's not just a box with holes in.
Yeah, and they hold in place. And
yeah.
Like this is the interesting for me is as I sort of reflect back on my life, or is reflect back on my life. Reflect back on my life. Like when I was a kid, I still remember I used to be playing, and I was always imagining that I was an inventor, that I was like one of like an inventor in a comic book, and I would like come up with these amazing things. And reflecting back, I think that's what I've actually become and what I've always done. It's sort of, I started coding and programming, and now we're in this age of 3D printing where I can sit at a computer and I can use my computer skills to like scratch a personal itch in the real world. Like I used to be only able to do that with code. Like, okay, I'll write a little program to do the thing I wanted to do, and then it's becoming a product. But now I can like, okay, I have all these cables here from my Eurorack system. This is annoying. What would I want to use? And then I try stuff out. I print it out on a 3D printer, iterate, and now it's the thing. It just
exists. It actually
exists. And I can make it anytime. I just press print and it's there.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is something I did talk about this on the show, but how this went from like an idea that you were showing on Facebook to your Facebook friends, and to being available to buy it's uwin.com for anyone interested. That's UWYN. I think that's right, isn't it? .com?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Yep. But this was then available to buy, and it was how long a process? 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
3 weeks. 3 weeks. 3 weeks from idea to being available to buy. And I mean, I found that astonishing. But as soon as this had become available, you were showing these other things, which are
Novatron.
Novatrons.
Novatron.
Oh, look at that! Right. Let me grab. Right. Okay. Let me hold my sparsely parsley one up. Look at the difference.
See, what is annoying with yours is that it's like so twiddly. Like you get these knobs and you don't really, like you can't really feel where they are. And like when you're not watching, like it's here, you got a little thingy you can just put your finger on and it turns the knobs. And at the same time, I don't have my blacklight lamp here. I took it down for a party last weekend. But they're blacklight reactive. So in the dark, they actually completely bloom up. And then I made them this is for a make noise instrument. So I have like the make noise no coast also has them. And I have all the Moog rack things. And you just got these little packs that you snap onto your knobs, and all of a sudden you can sort of play with. They become expressive. You can play with them with your fingers, just like wiggle them around, and you can just see them bloom up in the dark.
Great, because like otherwise you do have to kind of pinch and twist. You can just smooth your finger past and control. Yes. Right. Expressive control. There's a definite theme. Wow. So anyone interested to know? So what are they available for then at the moment then for the SQ1?
SQ1 I think it's $9 or $10. It's
right.
Like
wow.
Yeah, it's not much. It's basically I make a little pack for each instrument because I do. Like there's different versions for different knobs because sometimes the spacing of the knobs is too close, so I have to change the length of that little like touch thingy that sticks out.
The nubble, I think it's called. The nubble.
The nubble. Well, and so that they don't hit each other when the knobs are turning. Yeah. So I do make little packs for the different synthesizers, and then it's basically. The more knobs there are, the more expensive it's gonna be. But I also throw in like a bunch of free ones so that like it's split in half. You've got half orange and half green, and then like a whole bunch of free ones so that you can make up your own patterns.
Great. And if you lose any as well.
Yeah.
So this is again from uwin.com, uwyn.com.
That's it.
Yeah, great. And that's and then
Novatron.
Novatron. So I mean. Again, that was a really similar thing. It's just like you just started going, oh, look at this idea, and then it becomes a reality. So, incredibly short. And of course, now on a more serious note, and not connected to music technology whatsoever, you also put your kind of hand to creating face masks for dealing with this pandemic.
When COVID hit. Like a friend of mine who has a disaster relief organization here in North Carolina, it was initially we thought that the ventilators were going to be the biggest problem. So she got in touch with me. She said, look, you've got 3D printing experience. Can you find a way to create ventilator parts that are missing so that we can use them with existing or defective ventilators? So I started looking into that, but that was really not clear what the right approach was. So at that point, the maker community was starting to make face shields where you had the face shield band and then you could snap on a clear sheet on it, either nicely cut out ones, but also just like transparency sheets. And I'm like, I've got 3D printers. I can just help out. So my partner and I started this organization, ncppe.org, where the basic premise was anyone that, hang on, I got to go back in the story. Like the biggest problem that was hitting our community was little pockets of people, even hospitals, were not able to buy PPE. They couldn't protect themselves. Even if they wanted to give the cash, they couldn't protect themselves. And also people that didn't have any cash couldn't protect themselves. So we started the organization, and the basic premise was, you donate whatever you want, but anyone that asks for PPE, you'll get it for free.
Ah.
So it's disconnected. A lot of people donated in order to get PPE. Sometimes people donated more. Sometimes people had no money and they could just ask for PPE. And while going through that, it also became quickly apparent that masks were in big shortage. So I sort of went down this 6-month rabbit hole. I started partnering with universities, local universities, and specialists and doctors and labs in order to particle testing. I know way more about masks than I ever thought I would.
Yeah, wow.
In like trying to figure out how can you make a 3D printed mask that is still sufficiently protective. It is not going to be to the level of like the N95 masks, but I think we got it to 87%, which is way over any cloth mask or even surgical mask. And so we started printing these masks with replaceable filters, and we ended up donating 2,800 pieces of PPE, like printed here.
Wow.
Which like it was a lot of work, but pretty gratifying. And we got so many like messages from people that like of gratitude.
Yes. Well, I mean, this is really stepping up. We've got a global pandemic going on, and to be able to actually contribute in such a positive way is extraordinary. And congratulations for doing that. I mean, really speaks volumes.
I'm happy that we were able to do that, and we were able to make a difference, even though we were sort of locked up at our house.
Yeah.
And then I got all these 3D printers, so now I've got so many 3D printing ideas.
Right. Yes. So we all benefit. This is great. Wow. This is what an incredible story this has been tonight, and I'm sure everybody has enjoyed it incredibly. So thank you again, though. Hugely for coming on the show, and we'll have to get you back in the future because I'm sure there'll be some other unbelievable inventions along the way. So if anyone's interested, are you currently putting music out? Have you finding any time for that?
I don't like COVID has made me so busy on the other areas. When I moved here in March 2020, I had everything ready for a new album, and I haven't touched my guitar in a year. Well,
you've been pretty busy, to be fair. But
actually, I tuned it today for the first time.
Well, that's the first step.
Yes. So yeah, maybe in like I need to get this place because I just moved into a new house.
You're right.
That was like a whole other process. Moving to the States, I had to wait a year before I was able to buy a house. Like I sold my house in Belgium. Then I had to wait a year before I could get a mortgage here. So we've been renting in between. We just moved in here 3 weeks ago. And hence the echo. Still need to treat the room.
Right. No, you did have was it a bear? You had a bear in your garden.
Yes. We had a housewarming party last weekend, and when everyone was gone, like a bear came to check it out. It's like, hey, what was all the fun about?
Oh wow, that's incredible. So, gosh. Okay, well, but I think now is a good time to draw things to a close. And again, sort of thanks once more. And
thanks so much. Thanks for everyone for listening and watching. And you can always reach out to me if you got a question. I'm on the internet. I'm easy to find.
That's amazing. So please consider everybody giving this little show a like, just so more people can watch it, because I think it's a story that deserves to be heard far and wide, and any way that you can. Something I'm just going to repeat something that I said at the top of the show. If you missed that, what I'm looking to do is I want to do a little best of, because it's been a year now that I've been doing my show. So I want to do a little best of, which just when I show little clips of the best of, I say the best, just a little memorable bits. So if anybody out there has got any things that I should go back to, either music or guests, little bits, a really good idea is come up by my wife, actually. She said, why don't you get people just to go to the video in question and just leave a comment with a timestamp, say, here's a good bit, Gaz, 17 minutes 54. This, I appreciate, is a massive ask, and I don't imagine many of you are going to rush off to do that, but I would love it if you can, because I don't remember anything. So if you can remember, if you go, oh, that was a good thing, that would be great, because I just think over the course of the year, I mean, tonight, a fantastic example of this, doing these shows has been quite extraordinary, and some wonderful guests, and these are long form. I mean, gosh, how long have we been streaming for? 2 hours. So sort of being able to get some little highlights would be pretty good, just so we can so this stuff doesn't get lost in the digital slurry. I talk about the digital slurry,
yes,
the constant,
so much content,
yeah. However, tonight, as you are all aware, we've been talking the proper stuff. This is the real cutting edge, the real thing of where music's heading, and having the man himself join us is such a huge thrill. So, Geert, nearly Geert.
Yes, Geert.
Yeah. Well, you see, I'm Welsh. We've a lot of in
do it.
Ian Tyndale saying, "Oh, we're not doing the full 10 hours tonight." Well, we could do. No, I think we're probably best draw things to a close. And everybody in the chat room, thanks once more for all of your wonderful comments and support. It really is amazing. And for those of you who've tipped as well, thank you. That really is hugely appreciated. And I'll be back next Monday for my further adventures in Eurorack, where I'm going to be sampling sounds, making my own spheres into the Soon, the spherical wavetable navigator from 4MS. And as I say, the Soon, they call it the Swan, but SWN in Welsh, Soon is noise, which is just too cool. So I call it the Soon. It's the noise. Nice. And back on Wednesday for further Gaz Williams shows. So, here, thank you once more.
Thanks, Gaz. Thanks, everyone.
Amazing. Thank you. And we are signing out. Bye, everyone.
Bye.